section 4 of the instructions on the details.
And copy that, Peggy. We'll defer to the instructions in 2.102.
Okay, that's where we are.
You just heard communications between Axiom Mission 4 Commander Peggy Whitson and the teams on the ground as they were talking about the swapping of the lithium hydroxide cartridges as the hatch has been opened between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station just a few moments ago at 7:14 a.m. Central Time. And this is a view inside the International Space Station, looking forward, if you will, as the astronauts and cosmonauts aboard are looking up. That is towards the space-facing port of the Harmony module. That's where they are in now. If you were to keep going forward, if you will, that is the forward port, which currently is occupied by Dragon Endurance from Crew 10. And a great microgravity demonstration of the camera that Alexei Zubritsky is using to help document and be a part of the welcoming committee for Axiom Mission 4 here in the next few moments.
Dragon Houston on the big loop. Just to confirm, we want to make sure IMV duct installation is complete before we do LIO cartridge sealing.
Yes, the IMV duct installation is complete. My bad, I didn't get it reported.
Houston copies.
Views from pretty much the point of view of what the astronauts have been looking at. From what we have seen, they were looking up, and this is the shot up into that Node 2 just on the other side of that APAS hatchway, working with the Axiom Mission 4 crew. You heard them talking about IMV ducting and LIO cartridges. That IMV ducting helps mix the air of the International Space Station environment with the air inside of Dragon. And then also looking to seal up some of those lithium hydroxide cartridges that are used to scrub carbon dioxide from the air in the spacecraft on their journey to the International Space Station. And that journey started yesterday morning, 1:31 a.m. Central Time, 2:31 a.m. Eastern, as they would launch on the SpaceX Dragon, newly named Grace spacecraft, on a Falcon 9 rocket from Launch Pad 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, and would chase down the International Space Station earlier this morning at 5:31, nearly 2 hours ago, 5:31 a.m. Central, 6:31 a.m. Eastern, a little bit more of a day's transit.
Houston and SpaceX Dragon arrival configuration is complete.
Houston copies.
SpaceX copies.
Continuing to target a welcome ceremony or welcome remarks in the near future at 8:35 a.m. Central Time. So a little bit more than an hour from now is Axiom Mission 4 and the International Space Station continuing to work through hatch opening procedures, but getting close, you can start to see a little bit of a window of opportunity that was just on the other side of astronaut Anne McLean and Nicole Ayers there, working on IMV ducting, mixing the air of the station and Dragon, and lithium hydroxide cartridges, stowage and swapping out. So antlers are starting to clear out the hatchway, and we are going to see the first views of Axiom Mission 4. Commander Peggy Whitson, the first one across the A-Pass hatch, receiving great big hugs from Nicole Ayers and the Expedition 73 crew. Axiom Mission 4, welcome aboard the International Space Station. Pilot Shubhanshu Shukla is the next one to come across, representing ISRO. It is his first space flight for Peggy Whitson, her return to the International Space Station on her 5th flight, second as a member of Axiom Space. Sławomir Wisniewski of ESA, representing the nation of Poland. And their first visit to the International Space Station is next to cross the hatchway. And warm hugs all around. And applause breaking out here inside of Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room. And Tibor Kapu, the fourth and final member of Axiom Mission 4, representing Hunor and the nation of Hungary. Their first visit to the International Space Station as well. Great big hugs and handshakes across all members of Expedition 73 and Axiom Mission 4 is Anne McLean and Nicole Ayers of NASA, along with Johnny Kim, Kirill Peskov, Sergei Ryzhikov, and Alexei Zabritsky of Roscosmos, and Takuya Onishi, commander of Expedition 73 and of JAXA, with handshakes and hugs for Peggy Whitson, Shubhanshu Shukla, Sławomir Wisniewski, and Tibor Kapu. And with their arrival to the International Space Station, that now makes 288 visitors to the orbiting laboratory. Axiom Mission 4 is now aboard the International Space Station. Commander Peggy Whitson, in her return to the orbiting laboratory, her 5th flight. 3 is a member of NASA, and her 2nd as commander of Axiom, an Axiom Space private astronaut mission, commander of Axiom 2 and here of Axiom 4. Regaling the crew with smiles and stories. Her left, or our left from her viewpoint to her right, Sławomir Wisniewski of ESA, Shubhanshu Shukla to her left of ISRO, and Tibor Kapu on that far right-hand side of our viewpoint. The crew is safely aboard the space station. Welcome again to Axiom Mission 4. And continuing to target a formal welcome remark from the crew and being joined by the Expedition 73 team as well. That'll be at approximately 8:35 a.m. Central Time. And from there, they will receive a safety briefing and begin their nearly approximately 2-week mission aboard the International Space Station, in which they will participate in around 60 research investigations representing 31 countries, with more than 24 of those experiments sponsored by the ISS National Lab. And there they all are, waving back at our coverage here inside of the International Space Station Flight Control Room.
Station Houston on 2. Thanks for the wave. Great to see everybody.
Houston Station, we're happy to be here. It's so great to be here finally. It was a long quarantine.
And with the crew now in the space station, we're going to wrap up our portion of the live joint coverage from Hawthorne. It's been an honor to support Axiom Mission 4 thus far, and we wish the crew a successful time on the space station. We're, of course, also looking forward to joining AX4 again when it's time home.
Ronnie, from launch to docking, it has been an absolute pleasure having this desk with you. What has been years in the making for India, Poland, and Hungary is now well underway. Axiom Space and NASA's joint coverage will continue from here through to the welcome ceremony as Peggy, Shubhanshu, Swavesh, and Tibor start their 2 weeks aboard the orbiting laboratory. Over the course of our crew's time on station, we will be producing mission updates from Axiom Space's own space station development facility in Houston, Texas. So we invite you to follow the progress of AX4 on axiomspace.com and through Axiom Space's social media channels.
So with that, on behalf of SpaceX, Axiom Space, and NASA, thank you all for tuning in to watch. While our stream on X is coming to a close, coverage of the welcome ceremony now continues axiom.space/live and Axiom Space's social channels. With that, we'll turn it back over to you, Joseph. Have a great morning, everyone, and go AX4.
Go AX4.
Thank you very much, Paul and Ronnie, and thank you for joining us on this morning's broadcast as we continue on with our live coverage of the arrival of Axiom Mission 4 to the International Space Station, the 4th private astronaut mission to arrive to the orbital outpost and the first since January of 2024. We just saw the crew of 4, including Commander Peggy Whitson, Shubhanshu Shukla, pilot of ISRO, Swavesh, and Tibor Kapu of ESA and HUNOR, respectively, crossed the hatchway and into the orbital outpost for the very first time. We're continuing to follow along as we'll wait for the formal welcoming remarks that are currently scheduled for roughly 8 a.m. Central Time, so a little bit more than an hour to go as the crew continues to settle in. After you heard the remarks from Peggy Whitson mentioning the long quarantine, the ride up, which took a little bit more than a day's time to do so, as the teams here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room and special guests in the viewing room at the back of your screen on hand to witness this special moment and also to be a part of a handover period as the Orbit 1 team wrapping up their day's work, which certainly was busy. That saw the multiple burns as the Dragon spacecraft named Grace would continue its transit to catch up to the International Space Station, and ultimately docking at 5:31 a.m. Central Time with that initial contact. The soft capture turned to hard and mating. Hatch opening procedures took about 2 hours or so to complete, with teams on both sides inside the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station meticulously checking for leaks and going through each procedure step by step before that moment we just had a couple moments ago at 7:14 a.m. Central Time, in which these opened and the astronauts of Axiom Mission 4 floated on through to the International Space Station. We're currently experiencing a transition in communications satellites. That's nominal and to be expected, so we will bring you back those views inside the International Space Station once we have them. But again, the teams here inside of the International Space Station Flight Control Room, Orbit 1 team wrapping up a great day's of work, or great morning's work, that saw 4 new members join the orbital outpost to bring up the attendance to now 11. This is Mission Control Houston as we continue our live coverage of the arrival and docking of Axiom Mission 4 to the International Space Station that occurred a little more than 2 hours ago, as the team lifted off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center and Historic Launch Complex 39A yesterday morning at 1:31 a.m. Central Time to begin its little more than a day transit to the orbiting laboratory. And just a moment ago, the hatches were opened, and welcoming in Peggy Whitson, commander of Axiom Mission 4, Shubhanshu Shukla, pilot representing ISRO, in the nation of India, Sławosz Uznanski-Wiśniewski of ESA, and the nation of Poland, and Tibor Kapu of Hunor, as they have joined the crew aboard the International Space Station, and we will bring you those as soon as we have them, as we are currently transitioning between communications satellites. We are targeting a formal welcome remark and ceremony coming up at 8:35 a.m. Central Time, in which the team on board the International Space Station will go through the proper voice and audio checks and visuals to perform that ceremony. Earlier in the broadcast, Axiom Commander Michael Lopez Alegria, former NASA astronaut, about what can be expected during that ceremony, including a pinning ceremony that Commander Peggy Whitson will perform for the newest members to go into low Earth orbit, Nansky, Wiśniewski, and Kapu. And for those 3 representing India, Poland, and Hungary, they also represent the first visitors from those nations to the orbiting laboratory. You're currently seeing live views in the International Space Station Flight Control Room as the teams on the ground here in Houston are currently undertaking a handover period. Orbit 1 team that had the early morning hours and monitored Dragon's approach and docking will hand over to the Orbit 2 team, which will then take over for their shift of the day. Flight Director Allison Bollinger, Athena flight team, that Orbit 1 team undergoing the handover period as they will transition to the Orbit 2 squad, as we'll continue to follow along with live commentary and updates. The welcome ceremony and opening remarks on the arrival of Axiom at Mission 4. Flight Director Vincent Lacourt and Destiny flight team, the next on tap in this handover period. And there you see him in the foreground, setting up next to Allison Bollinger, Flight Director that just completed her shift, welcoming Axiom at Mission 4 and her Athena flight team as they continue their handover period. And as both teams monitoring the progress and preparation for the upcoming event, the welcome remarks from Axiom Mission 4 and their formal arrival to the International Space Station. And plenty of smiles and laughter throughout the room after a successful docking that occurred about 2 hours and change from now. And that was at 5:31 a.m. Central Time, in which the Dragon Grace spacecraft, soft capture connected to the International Space Station, and it's a space-facing port on the module. Hooks connected to form the hard mate, and then over the next 2 hours, begin the procedures to pressurize the vestibule, the gap between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. That was at vacuum. They wanted to bring the atmospheric pressure equal to that of what's inside Dragon and the space station, which is relative to here on Earth, which is equal to about 14 psi, which is sea level. And once that was able to be accomplished, the APAS hatch on the space station end was open. Shortly there followed by the pressurization and opening of the Dragon hatch. And that would occur at 7:14 a.m. Central Time. And crew is aboard the International Space Station, settling in after a little more than a day's transit to the orbiting laboratory. And we look forward to hearing from them here shortly for welcome. And again, tracking around 8:35 a.m. Central.